As an individual who's been following the gaming industry for years, the sheer level of excitement that can derive from getting a follow-up to your favorite game is unmatched. Whether it's a sequel to one of the most critically acclaimed games of all time, or a game with heavy online components offering even more online junk to sink your teeth into, or just an excuse to wonder what the hell Retro Studios has been doing for the past 5 years, video game sequels can come from the most unexpected places. However, while sequels to games are some of the most exciting things to come out of the gaming industry, the finished product may not always live up to the hype. And to clarify, this isn't to say that gaming sequels are bad by any means, I'm just saying that sometimes receiving sequels to your favorite games may do more harm than good. But, they can also do more good than harm. It's like getting scared by the idea of trying to do something different and unique for once. And today, I wanted to look at some pros, as well as cons, 3 of each to be exact, that can derive from video game sequels. Okay? Okay, cool. Let's begin. So because this is a pros and cons video, the most logical thing to do would be to start off with cons.
Because why not?
Now, when you really take a minute to analyze it, it kind of makes sense how people could perceive this. Almost always, video game sequels use the same engine as its predecessors, meaning elements like mechanics, visuals and sound, controls, hell, even the world design could be the same, which could lead to the average consumer finding it pretty hard to warrant spending the same amount of, if not more money, on the game that plays identically to its predecessor, and when a game looks to be adding its own spin on the original, it might not be as massive as the trailers and advertisements make it. Let me tell you, Tears of the Kingdom showcasing the Sky Islands in the trailers leading up to its release was cool on paper, and made me totally fine with the idea that the same world from Breath of the Wild was coming back, only to find that in the depths despite not being aware of it leading up to release, offered no form of interesting possibilities or explorations whatsoever, and kinda just makes me wonder why they even bothered making a sequel to begin with, when seeing how minimal the new terrain additions actually were. And for $10 more no less, well there goes my morality. And even aside from Tears of the Kingdom, I've seen numerous games with sequels that don't really do enough to set itself apart from its predecessors, and all it does is paint sequels in a bad light when it really doesn't need to. They may not be bad games by any means, but may not always do a good job showing that sequels are completely different games from its predecessors, which could impact sales. I said could impact sales. But on the opposite end of that spectrum, however, at least video game sequels gives the dev teams an opportunity to one-up themselves with the last game by adding new additions, as well as rectifying many of the flaws that players had with the prior entry. This was especially true in Mario Maker 2. Sure, Mario Maker 1 had a more intuitive and easy to use level maker, and some additions in Maker 1 like the amiibo costumes somehow didn't return in the follow-up, but I think Maker 2 added way more than it took out, adding tons of new level elements, even adding more post-launch via free updates, maker lessons, story mode, adding online multiplayer which could benefit from actually being good, but hey, it's here. Plus, I always felt like one of the bigger problems from Maker 1 was not having multiplayer, so it's great that it's finally here. I don't know, I know people find the first Maker better in some respects, and I agree with many of them, but I personally feel Maker 2 is a superior sequel, honestly. And while more doesn't automatically mean better, as we've already talked about with Tears of the Kingdom, adding more additions that feel substantial to the follow-up as well as rectifying a lot of the past game's flaws is what makes a gaming sequel good. And while not every follow-up was created equally, many were, and many of which even stand as some of the best games of all time. Portal 2.
Yeah, I just wanted a reason to bring up anything Portal related. Not the last time, I swear.
Now, many will probably argue that I'm being a bit unfair here, but hear me out. When you're making a direct sequel to another game, you're basically using the past game's foundation as a basis, meaning you may end up reusing like 50 to 60% of the previous game's elements to craft something new, but again, you're still reusing stuff made for something else, meaning when you really take a minute to think about that, yeah, you could kind of see how much of it may not be entirely original, even if the game's predecessor was. Not saying that this is a bad thing or anything, I mean it's honestly a smart idea to reuse elements from the past game on the sequel. It saves time creating new assets and models, and it gives them the opportunity to present these reused elements in a new way. It's just that when games go overboard with it is when it becomes a problem. And sadly, that's what makes this mindset that a sequel isn't original a con. Even if the game is just reusing an art style with some modifications as well as a few changes here and there, and different level design. it's virtually just the exact same game again. Like, is it really a coincidence that people grew tired of the new Super Mario Bros. Series, and why many didn't necessarily care all too much about the Wii U's first-party game lineup? And I think that last one is a very important one. And not that those games were bad by any means, but when the system's game library consists of mostly sequels to Wii and 3DS games, with like a few in there that were completely new experiences from the ground up made specifically for that respective system, I don't know, the problem basically writes itself. I mean, have you seen my reaction to Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze?
He has a tie?
And now you see why 2018 brought us to this point. Now, as strange as this might sound, I personally think one of the most exciting things about gaming sequels is just the fact that they're announced by their respective company. I mean, if you have your favorite game sitting on a shelf and you find out that a direct sequel has been confirmed, you're gonna be very excited. That's simply a given. Sure, just giving a logo would be kinda cool, if not a little lame, but seeing brief snippets of what this game will eventually look like, perhaps maybe an early build of gameplay or something like an opening cutscene, then cuts to the text, a sequel to blank is now in development for blank. There's just no other feeling like it. And even the build up to release can be a fun time. Speculating what you think will happen to the main character, or what this new world is going to offer just through the brief snippets of gameplay throughout the trailer. Sometimes this can actually be more exciting than the actual game, which would be embarrassing on the developer's part. But even if it's not, you can't deny that there wasn't ever a video game sequel announcement that got you embarrassingly excited while eating breakfast.
Metroid Prime 4?
Now, I want to reiterate, not all sequels are like this. However, I have seen instances of gaming sequels being put into development and releasing just to put something out without a care in the world of spending the extra money on it is justified or not. And this rule doesn't have to apply to bad games either. It could just be done to fix issues that people may have had with its predecessor. However, you can't tell me it's not a bad look for a company to release a game that's otherwise the exact same as its predecessor, but lacking with anything to stand out on its own. Remember the build up to Splatoon 3's release? It just looked like more of Splatoon 2. Which just looked like more of Splatoon 1. But Splatoon 2 was already a massive game with a huge fan base. You'd think a third entry would work best on Nintendo's follow-up console. And while the game reviewed quite well overall once it released, I did hear a lot of people say that it didn't feel all too distinct from 2, despite probably being a really good game. But did a sequel really need to happen though? On the same console no less? It may not have been done just to put something out, but that doesn't mean games that don't need sequels are excluded from this rule either. I don't know, I never really played Splatoon, so I couldn't give you my personal thoughts on the franchise even if I wanted to, but it's just a vivid memory of mine seeing how similar it is gameplay-wise to Splatoon 2. And finally, let's not forget about another possibility that gaming sequels can create, and that's the fact that it can create new fans of the franchise as well as bring back old ones. Like, let's say you previously weren't into Pikmin. You didn't play the first 3 games prior, but you've kinda had your eye on Pikmin 4 for a while, and after release, you give it a try, you love it, and you're now officially a fan of Pikmin and want to play more of its games. That's what I mean when I say it could create new fans. And I only know this because I've experienced this myself with many games actually. And while many titles with sequels don't work quite as well, possibly due to factors regarding the story or whatever, like for example, I wouldn't recommend playing Tears of the Kingdom before the original Breath of the Wild. Many do, and I think creating sequels to past games would not only invite returning fans into the franchise, but new fans into the franchise as well.
There you have it. I know 3 might not seem like much when it comes to a pros and cons video, especially for a topic like gaming sequels, but I believe they all offer their fair share of both pros and cons that makes them an important staple in the gaming industry. And if there's any you think I may have missed, please let me know. However, I think when it comes to one gaming sequel, there is one thing that I have to ask. More traditional yellow mustard, please and thank you.
And that's a wrap on today's video. If you enjoyed it, then please consider subscribing and checking out my other videos on my channel where you'll find more videos like this one. And with that, thank you all so much for watching, have an amazing rest of your day, and see you next time.